Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be continuing to configure our self-hosting environment with Open Media Vault and setting up Borg for our actual backup solution that we're going to use to back up all of our data. But before we do that, we're going to have a few items of maintenance to clean up from our last video and further explain. The first thing I'm going to start with though is going into System Workbench and setting the auto logout to 1 day instead of 5 minutes. So it does not auto log me out if I start rambling on for too long here. And then I want to go to storage and shared folders because we mounted all of our shared folders to just one specific drive. And what's nice about this solution, I believe I mentioned in the last video, is that you can address drives individually or you can address them across the data pool with mergerfs. And we did that by creating 3 dummy movie files and we placed them in mergerfs so it spanned those 3 drives. And we can see that under file system here just by the usage capacity. Each one of these has a 500 megabyte file on it. However, if we go to our shared media folder that we set up with Samba, we're only going to be seeing the 1 drive here. And I can show you that if we open up our file manager, go to network, go to our Open Media Vault server here, media, movies, we see we only have 1 movie file in there. Because the Samba share that we set up is looking at just this 1 drive, and this 1 drive only is holding the 1 file. The other 2 files are on the other 2 drives. So we're going to fix that. Today, we're going to delete this share. However, it doesn't allow us to delete it because it's being referenced by that Samba service right now. So first we got to go to services, to Samba, and remove the Samba share here. For the media, we're going to delete it. We'll unmount that network share as well from our file manager, and then we'll head back to storage, shared folders, and we'll delete the media, Open Media Vault shared folder. And don't worry, this is not going to delete any data that's in that location. It's just going to remove the reference to this shared folder within Open Media Vault. So we're going to click on delete. And then we're going to add it back using the data pool 1, the mergerfs file system. And you can see it is now using the mergerfs path. And then we're going to re-add the location for the Samba service. All right, now if we go back into our network share, clicking on this, back into our media folder, back into movies, you can see we can see all 3 movies now. Each one that's on the individual drive, they're all showing up under this same location because now this location is actually looking at mergerfs, and mergerfs is giving us a view across all 3 of those drives. One more thing I want to talk about before we get into the main topic today, and that's user file permissions, because we have not touched on that yet. I think now would be a good time to do that. So for that, you'd go to storage and shared folders, and this is where we can set up user file permissions. I want to give a few examples of what you might want to do with user file permissions, just to give you an idea of how they are used. One of the things that you may want to use them on is like on a backup folder. If you remember, we created that backup folder and we put a different folder for each user in there. So one for me, one for Kat. And then within these folders, of course, you'd be backing up your different devices to your server with. However, there is no need for me to be going into the Kat backup or vice versa, Kat to be going into the Tony backup location. And it could be a concern for privacy. That could be the reason for it. Otherwise, mainly for me, it's an issue of accidental file deletions. The Tony user that I have and that I use on my phone and on my laptops and on my desktop is never going to have a need to go into the Kat backup location. Now, of course, as the administrator, I still would have access to those files if I ever had to get to them, but the Tony user itself doesn't need to. And like I said, vice versa, the Kat user is not going to have the need to go into the Tony backup folder. So it's just a good way to prevent accidental file deletions. Let me show you how to do that. So you'd click on the path that you want to set up an ACL for, and then you click up here where it says access control list. And now if you want, you can dig down into subdirectories using this browse directory right here. So what I would do is click on the cat folder, hit choose, and then of course cat has read-write permissions on that, but then nobody else would get any read-write permissions. Now this is saying owner Tony because I created that folder within the file manager under the Tony user. So in this case, I would change this to make sure cat is the owner. And then if there are already files and other folders within that directory, you'd want to hit recursive. I usually hit recursive unless I want to apply it to just the one specific folder, and then hit save. And now if I go back to backups, I'm not going to be able to go into this cat folder anymore. And you can see the icon even changed, and the icon will actually even disappear. So I won't even know that there's another folder within this share if I restart the computer, or maybe if I even go into my folder and back out. Eventually that icon's going to go away, and I won't even know there's another folder within this backup location. So that's one example of how you may want to use it to prevent accidental file deletions. Now another good example that I can think of is, say, on a media folder where your movies, your TV, your music, all are going to be living. Let's set up some different scenarios for that. So if I click into access control list, we'll go to the movies folder here. And let's say you have a user for your media clients on your TVs. I use Cody. So I have Cody on each TV, and then I use the username Cody from the client to connect to the Samba shares. And maybe you want Cody to be able to delete files right from your TV there, and then you could give it read and write permission. Maybe you don't want it the ability to delete your files and you only want it to stream the files. You could set read only permissions, and then it could still view the content, but it couldn't delete anything. Now another good example would be in the media folder. Let's head over there with the file manager, media, movies. Let's say we have a folder in here called adult. And then we're going to go down into movies, adult. And there's adult content in there. And we have kids in the house. We don't want them to have access to it. Well, here's another really good example. Let's say Frank is a kid. We could go ahead and give no access to this one folder. And then, of course, Kat and me would have access to it. And then when you're setting up the TV, the Kodi client in the kids room, you can use Frank as the user to access the Samba shares. He won't even be able to see the adult folder. Same on his laptop, his tablets, anything like that you set up the Samba shares, you'd use that account. And you can even set up accounts for, specific devices if you want. It depends how much granularity you want. You can have a user account that's just Frank's TV and Frank's iPad, so you can get very specific on how you use user file permissions within Open Media, any Linux system, really. So it's really nice to be able to have that kind of control. But I think that's enough on user file permissions. There's a lot of different scenarios, of course, that we could get into on how to use them, but I just wanted to give you a nice cursory view on some basic examples. And now we're going to move on to Borg, the backup solution that we're going to be using for all of our data. And this is going to be our main backup solution that takes precedence over everything else. The first step is going to be to install Borg. We can use the plugin manager within Open Media Vault here, system plugins, and we'll just type in Borg and it'll show up right here. Click it, install, just like we did with other plugins. And now that is installed, under services, we have a new entry for Borg backup. And you can use this to set up your entire Borg backup solution, but I want to show you how to use it firstly using the terminal, because it is very easy to set up Borg using a terminal and a script to manage your backup. And it's the way that it's intended to be used. In my opinion, it's more efficient, it's easier to make changes, but it's not going to be for everybody. So I want to show you both ways that you can do it. To start, we will open up the documentation for Borg. There is a handy link right in Open Media Vault there for that. And this takes us to the Borg website. And the quick start is where you can start to see some basic information on how to set up Borg. So you can see the first command that we're going to use is Borg init encryption repo key path to the repo. Now we want to put this repo on our backup drive, and this is the first time our backup drive is coming into play. So if I head to storage and file systems, remember this is where Open Media Vault is installed. These are our 3 data drives. Our 4th data drive is set to be the parity drive with SnapRaid within this array. And then this is the backup drive that we've always been referring to that we haven't actually used yet, because the backup drive is only going to be for our Borg repo. We're not going to put anything else on this drive whatsoever. This is only going to be for our Borg repo. And so we're going to copy this path, and then we're going to SSH into the server. We'll start off by changing into that directory. So we're in the backup drive now, and we're going to make a directory called Borg. We're going to have to sudo that. And now we have this directory called Borg. Let's make a symlink to it. And remember, we've been putting all of our symlinks in this shared folder. And you can see we have a few different symlinks just to make navigating around when we're in the terminal and to reference things and scripts and whatnot a little bit easier instead of using these long UIDs. Although I do see this one, since we changed the media location to use the mergerfs mount point, we'll have to actually change this one right here. So let's start by removing that one real quick, and we'll set it back up. All right, now we'll create the one for Borg here. So LNS, the path of the backup drive, and then Borg. And then we'll just put that here as Borg. So now we have these different symlinks here. And we have the one for Borg, which is what we want. So now whenever we reference Borg, we can just go shared Borg. Very easy, much easier than using this long path. Now the first thing that we need to do is initialize our Borg repo. And that's very easy. We're just going to use this command. We do need to use sudo. So sudo Borg init encryption equals repo key, and then the path to the Borg repo, or the path where we want to put the Borg repo, which is going to be shared Borg. And then it's going to ask us to enter a password for this repo, and we can choose any password we want, and then it's going to ask us to confirm it. Now it asks, do you want to display it? I'll just say yes. I just set it to password. Now one thing here is it's going to tell us that it's a good idea to export your Borg key in case for some reason it gets messed up within the Borg repo. You can have a backup of it to still get access to your data. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Sudo Borg key export, and then we give it the path of the Borg repo, and then we give it the path that we want to export it to, and we're going to put this on our data drive under the backup folder. So that just created a file called Borg key in that location, and that is a backup of our Borg key, just in case. So we do have a Borg repo now, but it doesn't have anything in it. And the best way to use Borg is by setting up a script. So that's what we're going to do next. We'll cd to our home directory. Remember, we created this scripts folder in there that we're going to be creating a bunch of different scripts as we go on with this series. So let's go into there. We don't have any scripts in there right now, but we're going to make our first one. So we'll use our favorite text editor, Micro, and we'll create a file called backup. And this is our backup script. We'll do a shebang bin bash. It's going to be a bash script. And now we need to set this thing up with a few different variables. The first variable that we want to set is a variable that gets a timestamp that we can append onto the end of the backup when we take it. And I'm going to set this timestamp to be, I think the format that I want to use will go year, that month, that day, because it's going to be a daily backup. And that should be good. Control S. Now you see we have syntax highlighting. And this is just a command within Linux that you can use, this date command. So let me show you what it looks like if we just type it in here. Forgot to close my quote, but there you go. This is what it looks like. 231129 is what it would output. And we're going to append that onto the end of every backup that we take. But let's go back into our editor here and continue making this script. There's another variable that Borg needs in order for this to run without user input, and that's going to be export Borg underscore passphrase. And then here you would give it your repo password. If you don't put this in your script, then when cronjob runs it, your script is going to hang because Borg is going to ask for the password and there's not going to be anybody there to be able to type it in. Now, the other thing that I like to set is a variable that allows you to reference your Borg repo from the symlink or from the absolute path. And that's going to be this right here. It's a long one, so just bear with me as I type this out. And I like setting that one because I do use symlinks. So if I reference the Borg repo with the absolute path, and then I reference it from a symlink, it catches that and it'll ask, are you sure you want to do this? But if we're running it from a script and that happens, it again requires user input. That's going to hang the script. It's not going to go on past that. So if we put this in, we won't need to worry about it. Now, the next thing we need to do is this. We actually set up our archives and the backup folders that we want to back up. And it's very easy. We got a Borg create. I like to do stats. And then we give it the path to the repo. And here we can use the symlink to reference the repo. However, when we are giving it the locations to back up, we do not want to use the symlinks because as far as I know, Borg does not follow symlinks. Now, there might be a way to force it to follow symlinks, but either way, we're dealing with something that's important. We should be using the absolute paths here just to make certain it's backing up the locations that we want to have backed up. But then we're going to do double colons like this, and then we're going to give it an archive name. And the way I like to set my archives up is by using the shared folders here. Now, you can do it any way you want. You could just back up everything under one archive and be done with it. But I like to have a little more organization. So I would take each one of these. So this one, backups, and then a dot. Well, this is going to append the date onto the end of it. And then you give it the location that you want to back up. In this case, we would back up this. We just copy this path. And we'll full screen it. And this is going to create a backup of all the files there and put them in this archive, which will be named. And if you want to exclude something, which I'm not going to do on this directory, but maybe I will on the other one, it's just tac exclude, and then you give it the location that you want to exclude within that parent directory there. And we're going to do a Borg prune right after the create, so that's going to be a Borg prune. And this is extremely important. When you do a Borg prune, like in the way that I'm showing you, it's extremely important that you do glob archives and then you are selecting just the archives that you want the prune to be looking at. And so if we do backups and then use the wildcard with an asterisk to select for everything after backups so that it selects all the dates that get appended onto the end. If you do not do this, you're going to be pruning much more than you anticipated. And I would honestly recommend giving Borg Prune a few trial runs with some data. There's a dry run option in Borg Prune just so you can get an idea on how it works. If you go to usage in the documentation and then to Borg Prune, use this dry run command. So either -n or --dry-run and run a few tests to see how it works. It explains it throughout all of this because, to be completely honest with you, it didn't work the way that I thought that it worked. And so I had to do a bunch of different test runs using the -n just to see what was changing depending on the different arguments that I passed to it. And had I just ran it without understanding it and without this dry run option, I would have lost a lot of backup data. So you need to make sure you understand how it's working. However, this is what I now use. So glob archives, give it the backup with the wildcard, and then what we're going to do is select how much data we want to keep and how much we want to prune. So I would usually do a keep daily equals to 7, so 7 days. Keep weekly 4. Keep monthly 12. And keep yearly 1. And this is going to be dependent on how much data you want to keep for how long. And then you would give it the path of the Borg repo. And then we would be doing this with the rest of these shared folder locations. Looks like we have 1, 2, 3 more shared folders. Or let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 more shared folders. Now let me show you why I like Micro so much. It's really easy to use. We can just go to a line item and press Control-D, and it's going to duplicate it. So we have 5 creates now, and we'll make 5 prunes. And then we can go to a line item and hold down Alt and either arrow up or down to move the item. So we're going to move this one up there just for organization purposes. Be able to keep track of things easier. And then we'll put a few spaces between these just to make it easier on the eyes. And now all we need to do is change some of these other locations. So we got a Docker to back up all of our Docker. Our home folder. Our media folder. Now remember though, our media folder is in a different path because we're using mergerfs now for our media folder, so we need to change that. And finally our public folder. And then later on when we have Docker containers running, we would want to shut down the containers before this runs and then start them up after it runs. And then later on, we'll also be doing a curl to our monitoring system to make sure this script runs. But for now, this is good enough. So we'll Control-S, Control-Q. Clear the screen, and then we're going to chmod +X to make this script executable. So let me show you ls first. You can see it's just saying backup in white. Now we'll chmod +X backup. And now if we ls, you can see it's green because it's an executable script now. And we'll run it. We have to run it as sudo. And there you go, everything's backed up using Borg now. We want this script to run every single day though. So we need to go to System and Scheduled Task and make a scheduled task to make this run every single day. I would want this to run early in the morning, so let's say 1 o'clock. And then we have to give it the path to the script. So if we go shared home Tony scripts backup. And let me run that just to make sure it's working. It's always a good idea, because I catch myself making a lot of mistakes when I set this up, to give it a test run to make sure it's working. And it is. It's telling us that it already has created this daily backup, so that's fine. And that's how you set up Borg. It's very easy, a simple script, a few locations, a few variables, cron job scheduled in Open Media Vault. Very easy thing to do. There's nothing to it. However, how do you access your data? So let's say that we accidentally delete something. Let's go ahead and delete these 2 movies and restore them using Borg. Well, that is also very easy to do. It's just a few simple commands. What I'll do is create a temporary directory to mount the Borg archive to. So we'll just make directory temp. You can see it's right in our home folder. And then we're going to use a simple command to mount the Borg backup and then go into it and copy the file out. Before we do that, let's list our archives. So let's do sudo Borg list and then give it the path to the Borg repo. I'm going to ask for the password. And you can see all of our backups are listed here. And you can see how we formatted them with the different archive names, dot, and then the date got appended onto the end of that. So that's good. Every single day it's going to take a new one of these, and then it's going to prune based on the criteria and the arguments that we have set. So we can see those in there. Let's mount it now. So we'll do a sudo Borg mount, and then we do need to pass one argument to it, which is allow other. Because if we don't do this, since we're mounting it with sudo, we would have to use the root user in order to copy the file back out. This option allows us to just continue on with our Tony user in order to copy the file back out. So it just makes things a little more efficient. And then we do a shared Borg, the path to the repo. And if we want, we could even give it the specific archive to mount, but we're just going to mount everything here. And then we need to give it the path to mount to, and we're going to mount it to this temp folder here. Now it's asking for the password. And now if we change into the temp folder, you can see all of our archives are in there. So let's go to the media folder, and then we'll just tab through, because it does even retain the actual path that the file was on the server within the archive. Now in the media folder, we were going to movies because we accidentally deleted our movie. And then let's ls here. You can see it had backed up all of our 3 movies, and we need to restore them. So what we're going to do is copy them out back to the directory that we deleted them. So rsync a movie 2. What movies did we delete? Yeah, movie 2 and movie 3. Movie 3. And then we're going to put them back into our media movies folder. So that's done. Now if we go back to our file manager and press F5 to refresh, you can see we used Borg to restore those files. Now the next thing we'll want to do is to unmount. So let's cd back to our home directory, and we're going to do a sudo Borg umount, and then give it the location of the mount. And now if we go into the temp directory, it's empty. And you always want to verify that, because the next thing we're going to do is remove it. And now we can delete that folder, and we're done using Borg. So it's super simple. It's like 4 or 5 different commands that you need to know. The Borg documentation is really easy to use and to understand. The one thing that maybe isn't so easy to understand is how the prune works with all the different options. But they have the dry run feature where you can play around with it to dial it in to exactly how you want it to work. And there are Borg scripts out there on GitHub that you can copy and paste and use too. But I try to keep things really simple. And this is the way that I have it set up. Now, if that is not your thing, you don't want to be using the terminal, you just want to have a nice user interface to click on to get things set up, I'm going to show you how to do that next. So we're going to go to services and then to the Borg plugin here and then to repo. And here again, we're just going to be creating a repo. We can name it anything we want. Let's call it Borg 2. And then we're going to select a location for it. However, we have to use a Open Media Vault shared folder under this drop down. So we're going to head back to shared folders and then create Borg 2. Now you could just name it Borg, but we already made a Borg folder in that location to use the terminal toolings. You could name it whatever you want really, but we're going to call it Borg 2. And then we're going to set it on our backup drive. Again, this drive is only being used for a Borg repo. This drive gets used for nothing else. This is our actual backup system, Borg. That's it. We'll save that, apply it. Now we can head back to the Borg service here and we'll name it Borg 2. Set it on the Borg 2 shared folder, set our password, set encryption, and then hit save. And that created the repo. So that was basically doing the Borg init command. And now we can move on to Borg backup. We'll create our archives. And again, the same thing you would be doing. Let me copy this tab so we can reference our shared folders here. Move that around. We have our backups location. We would select our repo, compression, and then this is the include. This is the files that we want to back up then. Just like that. Excludes, if you want to do any excludes. And then down here is your retain daily, weekly, monthly, yearly. I would do a yearly backup. I'd change that. This also creates the schedule that Borg is going to run. So this kind of does things in the background for you. So this is going to not only do the prune within these time frames, but it's also going to create the schedule based on the first non-zero value. So if your first non-zero value is daily here, then it's going to create a daily schedule to run your backups. However, you're giving up some control because you don't really know when these backups are going to be running. Right now anyway, we don't know, is this going to run at 11 a.m.? Is this going to run at 1 a.m.? When is this thing going to actually be running? And then it does give you a prescript and a postscript, which is nice. So you still would have an option in the user interface to shut down your Docker containers and start them back up before and after the backup takes place. Then you would hit save on this. And you would do this for all the rest of them. And those are all set. Now up here we have options that we can edit. So if we do want to put those scripts in to shut down the Docker containers and start them up, we can later. We can delete an archive, we can get info, and we can manually run them. So let's start manually running these right now so we can do the same thing where we delete the files and restore from them. And let's accidentally delete. We'll do movie 1 and movie 2 this time. We accidentally deleted them. And then we'll go to repos here. And it's similarly very easy. You just click on your repo. You click on mount. And then you have to select a location to mount it to. Now, what's nice with the terminal, you have the freedom. You can mount it anywhere you want. Here, using the user interface, you have to mount it to one of the Open Media Vault shared folders. We'll just mount it into public here. And then you could use your terminal to go to that directory and copy them just like you did with rsync. You can use your file manager. So if we go into public now, you can see there's a new folder within the public directory called Borg 2. And we would go to media, again, dig down into the path, movies. We deleted these two, so we'll copy them back all the way out and go back into our media movie folder and paste them. There you go. Now that's been restored. Let me go back to our public folder. We have this Borg 2. It's still mounted. So again, let's remember we always need to unmount after we mount. So we'll click on unmount and we'll refresh. That check mark went away. Now if we go back into the Borg 2 folder, it's empty. So it is now safe to delete. And you do have some other options up here. You can change your password on your Borg repo, run a check, export, extract, list. List does same thing it did in the terminal. Info. All these things are available to you in the terminal as well. In my opinion, it's better to use the terminal over the user interface because you just have that little bit extra control. But that's going to do it for this video. We got Borg set up and running on the different locations that we want. If we add more locations, we can easily add them either through the plugin or into our script that we created. And the next thing that we need to do is set up a notification and monitoring system. And then that's going to be it for our base. We're going to have a rock solid self-hosted environment set up. And then we're going to start branching off into actually setting up a lot of different services. Thank you for watching. You all have a very nice day.